Welcome to my channel. You're not just a viewer, you're the reason we're here. If everyone who watches subscribes, we'll build an awesome community. Your support drives us, without it we're nothing. So hit subscribe, and let's make something incredible together. Thank you, let's dive in. The bookstore buzzed with quiet excitement as James Bowen stood behind a table piled high with copies of his first book, A Street Cat Named Bob. His pen scratched across another title page, his signature shaky, but sure. Beside him sat Bob the orange tabby, who'd become his shadow, his amber eyes half-closed basking in the attention. The line of people stretched out the door, some clutching books, others snapping photos of the cat who'd inspired it all. Betty lingered nearby, her smile soft and steady, a flicker of warmth in her eyes. Val, his lifeline from rehab, stood with her arms crossed, a proud grin tugging at her lips. His dad hovered at the back, fingers brushing a worn photo of James he'd carried in his wallet, a quiet regret etched into his face. James handed a signed book to a fan, her hands trembling with gratitude, and his mind drifted. Not to the day Bob wandered into his life, but further back, to the cold, hollow days when he'd been nothing but a shadow on the streets. That was where this story began, in the muck of his past, long before the cat, the book, or the flicker of redemption. He'd been invisible, then a drug addict scraping by on London's unforgiving streets. His family had washed their hands of him, their silence louder than any words. He slept rough every night, huddled in doorways or under bridges, his guitar slung across his back like a lifeline. Hunger gnawed at him, constantly driving him to paw through trash bins for anything edible. Half-rotten sandwiches, stale bread, whatever he could stomach. Passers-by didn't even glance his way, their eyes sliding past him as if he were part of the grime. One evening, desperate for something warm, he shuffled into a rundown restaurant, coins clinking in his palm from a day of busking. He counted them out, voice low, asking for a plate of chips. The clerk behind the counter sneered, eyeing his dirty clothes and trembling hands. Not enough, she snapped, then turned and dumped the food into the sink right in front of him. The clatter of the plate echoed in his ears, a sharp sting of rejection. James felt his chest tighten, a lump of shame and anger choking him. He mumbled an apology he didn't mean and slunk out the door, slamming shut behind him. That moment stuck with him, a low point that made him ache for something better. He missed his family, his dad's quiet presence, even his stepmom's cold stares. So he made a choice. He enrolled in a rehab program for drug addicts, determined to claw his way back to something resembling a life. It wasn't easy, but he stuck with it, until Baz showed up. Baz was a friend from the streets, another addict with a grin that promised trouble. One day he rolled up in a stolen car, engine rumbling, and leaned out the window. "Come on, mate, just a quick ride," he coaxed, his voice smooth as oil. James hesitated, the rehab rules ringing in his head. "No drugs," he said firmly. But Baz laughed, dangling a bag of powder in front of him. "Just one hit for old time's sake." James' resolve cracked. He climbed in, the familiar burn of the drugs flooding his veins soon after. It felt like sinking and flying all at once. The next morning he woke to shouting. The car's owner had tracked them down, furious and red-faced. Baz bolted, leaving James slumped in the passenger seat, too high to move. He barely registered the hands pulling him out, the sirens wailing, until he came to in a hospital bed, monitors beeping around him. Val stormed in her face, a storm of disappointment. "Where's my guitar?" James croaked, his first thought cutting through the haze. She glared at him, incredulous. "That's all you care about? I'm done, James. No more chances." Her words hit harder than the drugs wearing off. She'd been his anchor in rehab, the one who believed he could make it. Now she was walking away, tired of his excuses and half-kept promises. He lay there staring at the ceiling, the weight of his relapse pressing down on him. But when he was discharged, he couldn't let it end like that. He dragged himself to Val's office, head bowed, and poured out an apology, raw, messy, real. She sighed, her anger softening just enough. "Fine," she said. "But you check in with me every 2 weeks. No slipping up." She scribbled a prescription for methadone, a lifeline to ease him off the harder stuff, and paused. "Sing me something before you go." James picked up his guitar, thankfully recovered from the car, and strummed a quiet tune, his voice rough but steady. Val listened, her expression softening further. She cared more than he deserved. She even talked her boss into finding him a place to stay. A small flat, nothing fancy, but a roof over his head. "Rehab won't stick if you're still on the streets," she told him. When James stepped into that flat for the first time, he couldn't stop grinning. "Thank you, Val," he said over and over, vowing to stick to the program until he was clean for good. That first night, soaking in a bath after months of grime, he heard a strange noise, a soft scrabbling from the kitchen. Wrapping a towel around himself, he crept out to find a skinny orange cat pawing at the floor. It looked up at him, eyes wide and hungry. James chuckled, pouring some milk into a bowl. "Here you go, mate," he said, watching the cat lap it up. He'd been a mess himself, but something about the little stray stirred a gentleness in him. "Go on home now," he murmured, shooing it toward the door. But the cat just stared back, unwilling to leave, so James let it stay the night. The next morning, he went door to door with the cat tucked under his arm, asking if anyone owned it. No one claimed it, so he set it free on the street, figuring it'd find its way. Later, busking outside a building, he froze mid-song. His dad stood there watching him. James stammered out that he was in rehab trying to get better. His stepmom appeared, her face sour, and when he asked to spend Christmas with them, she snapped no and walked off. His dad fumbled, unsure, then pressed some cash into James' hand before following her. It wasn't much, but it was something. Back at the flat, James stopped short. The orange cat was sprawled on the floor, a fresh wound marring its side, mewling in pain. Panic seized him. He banged on his neighbor's door, and Betty answered, her calm demeanor a balm. She was a volunteer at an animal health center and quickly patched the cat up with first aid. "Take him to the clinic," she urged, then added, "Give him a name." James nodded, settling on Bob. The clinic line was long, and he fidgeted, worried about missing his check-in with Val. But he stayed for Bob, who needed him. The vet checked the cat for free, but the medicine cost more than James had expected. He pulled out the money his dad had given him, handing it over without a second thought. Back home, Bob squirmed as James tried to dose him, so he called Betty again. She came over, deftly administering the medicine and tossing in 2 cans of cat food. "I hate drugs," she said casually, her tone firm. "Live around too many addicts here." James swallowed, nodding. "Just a musician," he lied, looking for song ideas. The next day he met Val, grinning as he told her about Bob and Betty. She frowned when he mentioned Betty. "You're not ready for a relationship, James. Focus on you." Her words stung, deflating him, but Bob's purring presence lifted his spirits later. One morning, heading out to busk, Bob trotted after him despite James' protests. He gave in, and it turned out to be a blessing. People stopped, drawn by the cat perched on his shoulder. They listened, tossed coins, even asked for photos. For once, James wasn't invisible. He made more money that day than he ever had alone. An old lady who'd seen him before approached, smiling. "That cat's your companion now. Better than most people." She shuffled off, and from a distance Baz watched, eyes narrowing as James pocketed the cash. The next day, Baz appeared, all charm and danger. "Let's hang, mate," he pressed. James shook his head, desperate to stay clean, and shoved some money at him to leave. Bob stole the show again, earning James a Christmas gift from the old lady, cat food and a scarf. It lit something in him, a spark of joy after his family's rejection. He told Betty about it, thanking her and Bob for bringing light back into his life. The next day, buying cat food for Bob, he returned to find Baz sprawled on his floor, overdosed and barely breathing. James yelled for help, and Betty rushed in, her hands steady, as she aided him until the ambulance arrived. Afterward, she trembled, confessing her brother had died the same way. "I can't be around addicts," she whispered, her voice raw. James went straight to Val, begging to quit methadone fast. "Slow down," she cautioned. "After Christmas we'll try." Christmas came, and James risked visiting his dad's place with Bob. It went south fast. Bob freaked, toppling the tree, and they were kicked out. Betty welcomed them instead, gifting James a painting that made him feel seen. Days later, busking again, some jerk let his dog pee on James' bag. Furious, he lunged at the guy, and their scuffle drew the police. Val bailed him out, but with a warning, no more street music, or he'd face 6 months in jail. He bristled, more worried about Bob than the ban, and Val sent him for methadone to steady his nerves. At the pharmacy, Betty spotted him with the prescription and froze. "You lied," she hissed, storming off before he could explain. The high he'd felt crashed hard. To survive, he took a job selling newspapers for the big issue. Bob helped their 2 charming buyers, catching a journalist's eye for a story. But a jealous coworker ratted him out for selling in the wrong spot, landing him a month's suspension. Broke and fraying, he snapped at Bob's, meowing one day, then softened, guilty. Ignoring the ban, he buskied again, until Betty caught him. "The cops'll lock you up," she warned, her tone laced with care. Back at work later, a woman tried to buy Bob for her son. James said no. That one word lit the fuse. What followed was a heated argument. Voices raised, emotions high. Amid the tension, Bob, James' loyal dog, started barking anxiously. The noise and chaos spooked him, and in a flash he bolted out the door. James didn't hesitate the moment he realized Bob was gone. He ran after him, But no matter how hard he searched, no matter how many streets he turned down, Bob was nowhere to be found. As minutes turned into hours, James' worry grew into dread. The guilt hit hard. He kept thinking, I should have protected him. I should have done better. Bob wasn't just a pet. He was James' anchor, his constant through the storm of recovery. Losing him felt like losing a part of himself. Val noticed the shift in James. He barely spoke, he barely slept. She worried. Not just about Bob, but about James' state of mind. And then something unexpected happened. News of Bob's disappearance and James' frantic search caught the public eye. It went viral. People shared their story online. Newspapers picked it up. Among those watching was a leader at a writing agency, someone who saw something special in their bond. Days passed. Bob was still missing, desperate and growing more unstable. By the hour, James turned to a familiar but dangerous place. A local drug dealer's corner, not to use, but to ask questions. Maybe someone on the street had seen Bob. It was a risky move, but he was willing to try anything. And then, miraculously, Bob came home. No warning, no sign, just Bob right there at the door. The moment James saw him, he dropped to his knees and pulled him into a tight hug, tears in his eyes, relief, love, and gratitude all poured out at once. Bob was back, and that meant James could breathe again. Shortly after, Val did something unexpected. She gave James permission to pause his methadone for a full week. A test to see if he could go without it. This was the final stage of his rehab. If he could make it through, he'd be completely clean. James didn't hesitate. With Bob by his side, he felt stronger than ever. Before the week began, there was one more thing James needed to do. Apologize to Betty. He had lied to her in the past, and it weighed on him when he told her the truth and asked for forgiveness. Betty looked at him with warmth. She had always cared for him, and now she forgave him fully. Her only wish was for James to stay strong. The week wasn't easy. Every day felt longer than the last. But James pushed through. He leaned on Bob for comfort. He remembered Betty's words. He held on to the thought of a future free from addiction. And when it was over, he had done it. He was officially drug-free. The change in James was undeniable. There was light in his eyes again. Val couldn't stop smiling. Betty was proud, even though she was preparing to move in with her parents. But she made one thing clear. It wasn't goodbye. James was welcome anytime. Just when things were settling, James got a call from the writing agency. They wanted to work with him. They believed his story, his journey with Bob, deserved to be shared with the world. Excited and still in disbelief, James took a trip to his father's place. For a long time, they had been distant. James wanted to show him how far he'd come. When he told his dad he was clean, the old man's eyes welled up. Then silently, he reached into his wallet. His dad handed him that old photo, voice thick. I never stopped caring, son. James nodded, forgiving him too. Back at the bookstore, the signing line thinned. James looked at Bob, then at Betty, Val, and his dad. His past had been a tangle of pain, but here now it felt worth it. He'd fallen, fought, and found his way, with a cat named Bob leading the charge. Thank you for watching.